Now that we've studied some more sophisticated principles of arrangement, we need to apply those principles to our own writing. So let's look now at how we can apply what we've learned to creating more sophisticated Q1 and Q3 essays. We'll talk about Q2 essays in a couple of weeks. But before we go any further, go ahead and pause the video at this time to complete the reflection. Reflect on the question you're given in a paragraph. Make sure you write informally and off the top of your head. When you're finished writing your reflection, go ahead and unpause the video so that we can continue the lesson. Let's take some notes. The Q1 synthesis and the Q3 argument essays are both argumentative or persuasive writing tasks. One features sources to synthesize and the other doesn't, but you should really just approach arranging them, organizing them in the same way. Traditionally, we prescribe a 5-paragraph model for writing this kind of argumentative essay that starts with an introduction paragraph, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion paragraph at the end. We know the importance of an introduction and a conclusion paragraph already. So this lesson, let's just focus on what those body paragraphs are doing. We feel that we need at least 3 body paragraphs in this kind of an assignment in order to make an argument that seems complete. Yeah, just 2 body paragraphs feels incomplete, and there really isn't time with the 40-minute timer for more than 3 body paragraphs. So using that traditional method, each of the 3 body paragraphs is focused on making an individual supporting argument, an argument that helps support the thesis. College Board calls this developing a supporting claim. But really, each body paragraph is devoted to developing one of those 3 reasons why the thesis is valid, right? One of those 3 premises that you probably stated in your thesis. And each body paragraph contains a supporting claim and evidence and illustrative examples to help make up that supporting argument. But this approach can often present some problems with timing. For most people, 40 minutes is just not enough time to write 3 fully developed, fully explained, thoroughly supported argument paragraphs, right? And so what we often end up doing is we have a couple of good body paragraphs and maybe a rushed 3rd body paragraph. Oftentimes we have to abandon our conclusion altogether when we're forcing ourselves to write those 3 full body paragraphs. And so these are some problems that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with having. But if we apply the 5 stages of effective arrangement, those 5 goals that we've been studying, to writing the Q1 and the Q3 essay, we might have a solution to our limited timing problems. Here then is a new pattern of arrangement for Q1s and Q3s that follows that 5-stage, 5-goal model that we've been looking at. So we're going to continue to engage the audience in paragraph 1. This time, however, paragraph 2, the beginning of our body, we're going to devote to priming the audience. And we'll get into more of what that means in a moment. Paragraphs 3 and 4 are still going to be guiding the audience through our supporting reasoning. The beginning of paragraph 5 will be devoted to leading the audience to the conclusion. And then finally, we'll continue paragraph 5 and conclude the essay by making the audience care. Let's go through each of these paragraphs in this new model one by one. So paragraph 1 should look pretty familiar. The goal is to engage the audience, which is pretty standard for the introductions that you've been taught to write. We need something that engages the audience up front by interesting them, provoking curiosity, that hook that you guys have been taught to write, transition into establishing the topic, the debate, the issue, whatever, and then establishing what your thesis is. This first paragraph in the new model should still be 100 to 150 words. You really don't want to go over that because you're just wasting time at that point. Paragraph 2 is where things really start to change from that traditional model. As we know from the second stage of effective arrangement, the next goal after engaging the audience should be to prime their understanding, to give them what they need to understand up front before you start making your supporting arguments. So in that second paragraph, we're going to use it to establish whatever key understandings we need to establish up front that will help us focus our argument in the rest of our essay. This paragraph 2, it's a body paragraph, but it should be a short body paragraph. It should really be no longer than the introduction at about 100 to 150 words. Paragraphs 3 and 4 are going to serve basically the same purposes to guide the audience through your reasoning so you can make 2 separate supporting arguments instead of 3. So you want to use what you established in paragraph 2, use that understanding to make 2 really good points. They should still be supporting that primary claim of your thesis. They should still acknowledge the limitations of your argument through concession and qualification, still use those tools. You should still work in rebuttal and refutation of opposing arguments where you can. All of that is just how you create more sophisticated arguments in general. And whatever focus that you established there in paragraph 2 can actually help you write paragraphs 3 and 4. It gives you a little more guidance on what you need to write about. And that way you're covering less ground horizontally, but going deeper vertically, which is always a much better, which is what the raters really want to see when grading your essay. Finally, we get to paragraph 5. This is going to be a fairly typical conclusion, but since we've kind of shortened up the body, we should have time to actually write a true conclusion paragraph. So our first goal is to lead the audience to our conclusion. The second goal here is to make them care about that conclusion. So that's really how you've been taught to write. We want a couple of sentences recapping the line of reasoning in your thesis, a couple more sentences exploring consequences, looking to the future, remarking on the topic's importance overall, etc. Whatever you do to make the audience care about that conclusion you've just come to. Overall, this new pattern of arrangement can help us in a lot of different ways. It can help us progress more deliberately through our discussion. In a previous lesson, I talked about how the biggest thing that we need to understand about effective arrangement is that your ideas need to move in a direction. They need to build from point A to point B and point B to point C and so on, so that I can't mix it up and still get the same effect. It needs to move deliberately, and this new pattern will help with that. This new pattern will also help us focus our ideas when we're not sitting there scrambling trying to come up with 3 separate supporting reasons, and instead force ourselves to write that kind of priming the audience paragraph where we're establishing some key understandings. We can then limit the rest of our body to just ideas related to those key understandings. As I said a second ago, this can also help us by not having to come up with 3 separate supporting arguments and just 2, which will save us time and a little bit of stress. This particular pattern can also force us to acknowledge the key ideas within the issue at large, which will make our arguments more believable, more important, more significant, and just help you appear more aware of the complexities of the issue. It can also maximize your score on the exam, and we'll look at that in the writing workshop that comes up after this lesson. Finally, I really think that this new pattern of arrangement can help you save time. This should shorten up the body of your essay and still allow it to feel complete. Please note that this pattern of arrangement does not leave room for a counter-argument paragraph. I know you've probably had teachers in the past who taught you to write a counter-argument paragraph. Honestly, on a 40-minute timed essay, I don't think a full-blown paragraph devoted just to countering a whole bunch of counter-arguments, I don't think that's worth your time. Instead, I think you need to work in counter-arguments with the rest of your body paragraphs. I just don't think devoting a separate paragraph to that is worth it. So, as you've probably noticed by now, the biggest difference between this new pattern of arrangement and the traditional older pattern of arrangement is that you're really changing the purpose of just one body paragraph. But that's a big difference. Yeah, you're removing one supporting argument and instead replacing it with a paragraph that works to prime the audience to some key understandings. So that raises the question, what should that paragraph look like? What should priming the audience look like on the Q1 and the Q3? Well, unfortunately, I don't have a clear, specific, works every time answer for that because it depends on the prompt. There's a lot of different kinds of prompts that you can be asked on these essays. If you're asked whether something should or should not be done, well, then what you should do in paragraph 2 is establish the conditions on which a course of action would be deemed successful. Because unless you've established what counts as success or what the goal is of any choice that you have to make in this situation, it's hard to prove that your course of action is the right course of action. If the prompt asks you to make a judgment about something, well then paragraph 2 should establish the standard on which that thing ought to be judged, because only once you've established that up front can you argue that your standard of judgment is valid, that your judgment rather is valid. If you're asked to evaluate a claim or an argument that someone else has made, we haven't seen a prompt like this year, but they have had them in the past. Well, if I'm asked to evaluate an argument someone else has made, well, paragraph 2, I want to spend fully explaining what that claim or argument is and all the context behind it before I then either concur with it or refute it. So in the end, there's no one right way to do this, and it requires a little bit of critical thinking, but the benefits are really, really powerful here. So in the end, even though there's not one right way to do this, when you get to that second paragraph and it's time for you to prime the audience for their understanding, just ask yourself, what does my audience really need to know about whatever argument you're about to make before I make that first supporting argument? What does my audience need to know first? Let's take a look at an example here of how I might approach that second paragraph in a couple of different familiar prompts. This one should be familiar to you. It's the first Q3 that we wrote back in quarter 2. It asks us to write an essay that argues your position on the ethics of offering incentives for charitable acts. This is a real hit or miss essay, and I think that if you guys had a chance to write this one over again, now you do a lot better with it. But this is one of those prompts that requires that we make a judgment about something. When we're asked to decide whether something is ethical or not, we're asked to judge that thing. So here, our second paragraph, priming the audience, should establish our standard of judgment. In other words, we need to establish up front what it is that makes an act considered ethical or more ethical than another act. Once this is established, I can make my supporting arguments using this standard of judgment as my assumption or underlying principle for proving why my judgment is valid. So I might start with this as my thesis statement. I say start, I mean just starting my planning. I wouldn't want to start my essay with my thesis. So here's my thesis. Offering incentives for charitable acts is ethically permissible because it provides greater assistance for those in need and does not diminish the help that is received. Notice how in my thesis statement there, I've only got 2 supporting premises. That's because I only plan to have 2 supporting argument paragraphs. I don't need that third one now because that third body paragraph is going to be taken up by priming the audience. To support that thesis, of course, I need an introduction where I engage the audience. My second paragraph, here's the critical one where I prime the audience. I want to establish that ethical actions are defined by what does the most good for the most people and does the least amount of harm. Okay, I'm going to define what the most ethical course of action must be. And this is just a utilitarian theory, okay? Utilitarians define the ethical course of action as what does the most good for the most people, and that is largely the most agreeable definition of what is ethical. Once I've established what ethical actions are or what constitutes the most ethical action, then I can apply that to my first line of reasoning here, arguing that incentives inspire more people to give more. thus doing the most good / least harm. And then in my my third body paragraph, my second line of reasoning here, I can argue that giving people incentives for their donations does not significantly take away from what is ultimately passed on to those in need. Thus, again, doing the most good and the least harm. And then finally, of course, I just finish up with a conclusion like we're used to. So that's one way that I could approach this particular prompt, by first priming the audience, and then I would only have to come up with 2 supporting reasons to help fully develop that thesis. Let's look at a sample prompt here. This is from the Q1 that we wrote in the first quarter. This was the one about wind farms. Yeah, it says, write an essay that synthesizes material from at least 3 of the sources and develops your position on the expansion of wind energy in the U.S. So it's all about your position on the expansion of wind energy. There we go. This prompt asks about a fairly contentious issue, right? Should wind energy be expanded? Now, honestly, this issue should not be politically contentious, but it has become politically contentious because of all the fossil fuel interests in very powerful people in the country. So it's become a very contentious issue. So my second paragraph, where I prime the audience, I think here I would borrow from the Rogerian model. I would demonstrate an understanding of the drawbacks of expanding wind energy, but conclude that current energy production is just not sustainable, because that's really hard to argue with, right? If I acknowledge to my opponents that, hey, I get that there are drawbacks, but honestly, can you sit there and say that we can keep going like we're going now forever? No one's gonna say yes to that. So once this is established, I can then make my supporting arguments based on this mutual understanding. So I'm kind of using paragraph 2 to come to a mutual understanding with those in my audience who are opposed to my position. So here would be my thesis. Wind energy ought to continue to be expanded in the U.S. because it is both environmentally and economically necessary. Note my 2-part thesis there, because I only need 2 supporting premises, because I'm only going to write 2 supporting argument paragraphs. My first paragraph, of course, my introduction. The second paragraph, here I prime the audience by acknowledging the common legitimate criticisms, not the crazy conspiracy theory criticisms, but the legitimate criticisms. I want to acknowledge them as real concerns, but then ultimately question whether these concerns really outweigh the benefits that expanded wind energy could bring. So really acknowledge, yes, I know it poses a danger to some species of birds. I know it poses human health danger when wind turbines are placed in a particular, within a proximity of settlements, that sort of thing. But then at the end of the day, isn't that all things that we can engineer around, right? And aren't the benefits really outweighed by these minor drawbacks? With that common understanding established, I'll start in with my first line of reasoning, arguing the obvious environmental benefits, that it's clean, sustainable, capable of providing power to our entire energy grid, and so on and so forth. And then I'd move into my lesser known economic benefits, that it's relatively inexpensive compared to other forms of energy production. It's efficient and it's capable of creating jobs and revitalizing economies. And in both of those, both paragraphs 3 and 4 there, I'm going to make sure to use a lot of concession and qualification, and even some counter argument as well, by acknowledging that I understand that, for instance, the safety issues posed to living too close to wind turbines and all that, but then refute that this is just an engineering challenge, not a general problem with them, that sort of thing. And then lastly, finish up with my conclusion. So there is my 5-paragraph kind of outline for how I would approach this prompt under this new pattern, this more sophisticated pattern of arrangement. In the next set of exercises you're going to be asked to do today, you're going to be asked to use this model. So make sure that if you don't have all of your notes filled out by this point, make sure you go back in and fill out the note sheet, because you're going to have to use this model on the writing workshop coming up. All right, that is it for this lesson. There's no exercises to complete, no practice activities for this lesson. From here, I just want you to move on to that writing workshop, which will walk you through looking back at the last Q1 and Q3 that you wrote in the mock exam and revise those and kind of redesign those using this new pattern of arrangement.